I thought the holiday was meant to bring us closer. Instead, it was the moment my own mother decided to break me. I didn't know it yet, standing in that airport with a suitcase I could barely afford, but that trip would become the most painful holiday drama of my life, the kind people whisper about, the kind that starts as love and ends as family betrayal. And no, I'm not telling you how it ends, not yet. At the time, I still believed in her. I believed that when a mother invites her daughter on a healing holiday, she means it. I believed the smiles in her texts were real. I believed that after years of tension, this trip would finally fix us. That belief was my weakness, and she used it. I'm a woman in my early 30s, independent on paper, emotionally still tangled in the hope that one day my mom would see me, really see me. I had built my life quietly, a steady job, a small apartment, routines that kept me sane. But every crack in my confidence led back to her voice, her opinions, her subtle disapproval disguised as concern. When she suggested the trip, everyone told me I was lucky. A free holiday with your mom? That's sweet. They didn't hear the tone. They didn't read between the lines. This wasn't just a vacation. It was a test, and I didn't know I was walking into it. She chose the destination. She chose the dates. She even chose the hotel. All I had to do was show up, emotionally open, grateful, and vulnerable. Perfect conditions for what would soon become the most calculated family betrayal I'd ever experience. On the flight, she held my hand during turbulence. She told stories about my childhood, the happy versions only. She laughed loudly like a woman proud to be seen as a loving mother. I remember thinking maybe I was wrong about her. That thought still makes my stomach twist, because manipulation doesn't arrive screaming. It arrives smiling. The first few days felt normal, almost warm. Breakfasts together, photos for social media, long walks where she asked questions about my life, my job, my relationships, my finances. Questions that felt caring, but lingered just a second too long. I answered anyway. That's the thing about holiday drama. It doesn't feel like drama at first. It feels like safety, like lowered defenses, like you're finally allowed to rest. And rest is dangerous when someone is waiting for you to fall asleep. By the fourth night, I noticed small shifts, comments wrapped in jokes, comparisons disguised as advice. Moments where she corrected my memories, gently, confidently, until I questioned my own. Classic gaslighting, though I didn't have the courage to name it yet. Still, I told myself I was imagining things, because admitting the truth would mean accepting that this trip wasn't about healing. It was about control, and eventually, revenge. I didn't know what she was planning. I didn't know who else was involved, and I definitely didn't know that by the end of this so-called holiday, I'd be standing alone, emotionally wrecked, wondering how a mother could orchestrate such precise family betrayal and sleep peacefully afterward. But that realization was coming, slowly, quietly, and far more painfully than any fight could have been, and this was only the beginning. Before that holiday, my relationship with my mom had always lived in a strange gray area. From the outside, we looked close. We talked regularly. We celebrated birthdays together. We posted smiling photos that convinced everyone we were fine. But behind closed doors, there was always tension, unspoken rules, invisible expectations, and a quiet fear of disappointing her. She had a way of making love feel conditional. Growing up, I learned early that approval had to be earned. Good grades earned praise. Obedience earned peace. Independence, however, was treated like betrayal. When I moved out in my 20s, she said she was proud, but her voice was tight, controlled. Ever since then, every decision I made felt like a silent challenge to her authority. So when she suddenly suggested a holiday together, I was confused but hopeful. She called it a reset, a chance to reconnect, a break from stress. She said she'd noticed how distant I'd become. That hurt because I didn't feel distant. I felt cautious. But hearing her acknowledge the distance made me want to fix it. That's how family betrayal begins sometimes. Not with cruelty, but with hope. I told myself this wasn't some toxic holiday drama story. This was real life. This was my mom trying. The destination was beautiful. Warm mornings, blue skies, tourists laughing everywhere. The kind of place designed to make people lower their guard. We shared a room to save money, her idea. At first, it felt nostalgic, like being a kid again. That feeling didn't last. She started commenting on my routines. You wake up late now. You don't eat like you used to. Are you sure your job isn't stressing you too much? Each comment landed softly, but together they chipped away at me. I found myself explaining things I'd never had to justify before. My lifestyle, my choices, even my tone of voice. And every time I pushed back, even gently, she laughed it off. "You're so sensitive. I'm just worried about you." Classic family betrayal disguised as concern. What made it worse was how calm she seemed. She always knew exactly what to say, especially in public. Around strangers, she was affectionate, complimenting me, telling people how proud she was of her daughter. I smiled along, wondering why I felt so small. At night, when the room went quiet, my thoughts raced. I replayed conversations. I questioned myself. Was I overreacting? Was this just normal mother-daughter tension amplified by travel? That's the danger of subtle holiday drama. There's no explosion, just erosion. She also started asking very specific questions about my savings, my lease, my long-term plans, about whether I'd ever consider moving closer to her, about who I trusted, who I relied on. I answered because I wanted peace, because I wanted this holiday to work, because deep down I still wanted her approval. Looking back, I can see the pattern clearly. She was mapping my vulnerabilities, taking inventory, preparing something I couldn't yet see. And while I slept peacefully, believing this trip was a step towards healing, she was already laying the groundwork for something else entirely. Something colder, something deliberate, something that would turn this emotional holiday drama into the most painful act of family betrayal I'd ever face. And when it happened, it wouldn't look like revenge. Not at first. But that doesn't mean revenge wasn't coming. By the fifth day of the holiday, something felt off in a way I couldn't explain without sounding ungrateful. Nothing had happened, and yet everything felt wrong. The air between us was heavier. Conversations lingered too long. Silences stretched just enough to make me uneasy. That's how real holiday drama begins. Not with shouting, with discomfort you can't point to. My mom became more observant, too observant. She noticed what I wore, how long I stayed on my phone, the way I reacted to certain topics. She'd tilt her head and smile, like she was studying me. "You seem different," she said one afternoon, watching me stir my coffee. Different from what? I wanted to ask. The version of me you can control? Instead, I shrugged. She started sharing stories about other families we knew, cousins who'd failed, friends' daughters who'd made bad choices. The message was always subtle but consistent. Independence leads to loneliness. Confidence leads to regret. Distance leads to punishment. This wasn't advice, it was conditioning. One evening, we met some of her old friends for dinner. I didn't know she'd invited them. I sat there smiling while she told stories about me, not cruel ones, but incomplete ones. She framed my life as unstable, temporary, like I was still finding myself. I laughed along. My chest felt tight. That was the first time I realized she wasn't just talking to me, she was talking about me, shaping a narrative, laying the foundation for something that smelled a lot like family betrayal. Later that night, I confronted her, gently. I told her I felt exposed, misrepresented. She stared at me like I'd accused her of a crime. "I was proud of you," she said. "You're imagining things," she added. Gaslighting doesn't raise its voice. It questions your reality until you stop trusting it. After that, she pulled back emotionally. Less warmth, more distance. She'd disappear for hours without explanation. When I asked where she'd been, she said I was being controlling. That word stung. It twisted something inside me. Suddenly, I was the problem. I started apologizing for things I didn't do, for moods I wasn't in, for tension she created. That's when I knew something was seriously wrong, but I still didn't understand why. One night, I overheard her on the balcony, speaking in a low voice. My name came up, then my job, then something about responsibility. My stomach dropped. I didn't confront her, not yet. Instead, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every question she'd asked about my finances, my living situation, my future. This wasn't random. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was deliberate. And suddenly, the entire holiday drama reframed itself in my mind. This trip wasn't meant to reconnect us. It was meant to destabilize me, to make me doubt myself, to isolate me emotionally so when the real family betrayal happened, I wouldn't fight back. That realization didn't come with clarity. It came with fear. Because when someone spends this much time quietly tearing you down, it's usually because they're about to take something. And whatever she was planning, I had a terrible feeling it wouldn't end with words. It would end with consequences, and eventually revenge, even if I didn't know yet who it would belong to. The breaking point didn't come with a scream. It came with a sentence so calm, so casual, that it took me a full second to understand what she was saying. We were sitting in the hotel lobby, waiting for a taxi. She was scrolling through her phone, completely relaxed. I was already tense, exhausted from days of quiet holiday drama that never gave me a moment to breathe. "I talked to someone about you," she said, without looking up. I felt my body go still. "Who?" I asked. She smiled, the polite public smile she saved for strangers. "People who care," she replied. That's when the truth started to crack through. She explained it slowly, almost kindly. She had reached out to family members back home, old friends, even someone connected to my workplace. She said she was worried about me, that I seemed unstable, overwhelmed, at risk of making bad decisions. Each word landed like a quiet slap. I asked her to stop. She didn't. She told me she'd shared personal details I had trusted her with, my finances, my stress, my doubts. She framed it as concern, responsibility, love, but I could hear it for what it was. This was family betrayal, carefully dressed as protection. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear the rest. Something about plans, about support, about how I'd thank her later. That's when I realized the full weight of this holiday drama. She hadn't just invaded my privacy, she'd positioned herself as the authority over my life, over my story. I stood up, my hands were shaking. "You had no right." Her face changed instantly. No smile, no warmth, just control. "I'm your mother. Of course I had the right." That sentence broke something inside me. All the doubt I'd been swallowing suddenly made sense. The questions, the gaslighting, the public performances, the private coldness. This trip wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a strategy. And it worked. I went back to the room and locked the bathroom door. I slid down against it, struggling to breathe. My chest hurt. My thoughts raced. I felt small, trapped, exposed, like my life had been discussed and decided without me. This was the moment she wanted. When someone dismantles you emotionally, they wait for the pause, the silence, the moment you collapse inward. That's when they take control. I didn't cry loudly. I didn't scream. I sat there in that quiet hotel bathroom, staring at the floor, realizing how deeply I'd underestimated her. This wasn't just family betrayal. This was an attempt to rewrite my identity. And the worst part? She believed she was right. That night, we didn't talk. The room was silent except for the sound of traffic outside. She slept peacefully. I didn't sleep at all. I kept thinking about what she'd said, about who she'd contacted, about what stories she'd told, about what consequences were already in motion because I'd trusted her. That silence, that space between what she'd done and what would happen next, was unbearable. Because I knew one thing for certain. The holiday was over, and whatever came next would change everything. I just didn't know yet whether I would survive it or whether this family betrayal would finally destroy me. And somewhere in that deep, broken moment, something else began to form. Not anger, not yet. Something colder, something patient, something that would eventually look a lot like revenge. The next morning, I didn't confront her. That surprised even me. I woke up with swollen eyes and a hollow chest, but my mind was clearer than it had been all week. The shock had burned off the confusion. What remained was understanding. This wasn't emotional chaos anymore. It was holiday drama with a pattern, and patterns can be learned. She watched me carefully over breakfast, as if expecting an outburst. When I smiled and thanked her for the coffee, something flickered in her eyes. Disappointment? Suspicion? I wasn't sure, but I knew one thing. Silence unsettles manipulators. I started listening instead of reacting. I asked neutral questions. I let her talk, and she did, freely. People who believe they're in control often reveal more than they realize. She mentioned a conversation she'd had with my aunt, a call to an old family friend, a concerned message she'd sent to someone at my workplace just to check in. Each comment confirmed the scope of the family betrayal and also showed me its weaknesses. She had moved too fast. By midday, I excused myself and went for a walk alone. My hands were steady as I made calls. Quiet ones, careful ones. I didn't accuse, I clarified. I corrected narratives, calmly, professionally. I told my side of the story before hers could solidify. That's the thing about quiet revenge. It doesn't announce itself. It restores balance. I explained to my employer that my mother was anxious and had overstepped. I reassured them I was stable, focused, and fully capable. They listened. They thanked me for being proactive. One threat neutralized. Next, I contacted the family members she'd spoken to. I didn't expose her cruelty. I exposed the truth, that she'd acted without my consent. Some were shocked, some defensive, but the story shifted. Control slipped. Back at the hotel, I was calm. Too calm. She noticed. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice tight. "Better," I replied, and I meant it. Because for the first time during this holiday drama, I wasn't reacting. I was choosing. She tried to provoke me that evening, subtle digs, passive comments. When I didn't respond, she grew irritated. When control fades, frustration rises. And that's when I understood something important about family betrayal. It only works if you stay small. I didn't confront her lies directly. I didn't demand apologies. I let her feel the absence of influence. I stopped sharing details. I stopped seeking approval. I became emotionally unavailable, polite, distant, unreachable. She hated it. Over the next 2 days, she scrambled, made calls, sent messages, tried to reassert her narrative. But it was too late. I had already reclaimed my voice, quietly, piece by piece. This wasn't revenge fueled by rage. This was revenge fueled by clarity. And clarity is dangerous to people who rely on confusion. By the time our return flight approached, the power dynamic had shifted completely. She sensed it. She just didn't know how to fix it. Because what she broke on that holiday wasn't me. It was her illusion of control. And the final consequences of that family betrayal were already unfolding, whether she was ready to face them or not. Karma didn't arrive with drama. It arrived with exposure. A week after we returned home, the consequences of that holiday drama began to surface, not because I pushed for them, but because the truth has a way of unraveling carefully built lies. My mom called me first. Her voice was tight, controlled, the way it got when things weren't going according to plan. She asked why people were misunderstanding her intentions, why relatives were suddenly distant, why someone had questioned her version of events. I let her talk. For years, she had spoken for me. Now, people were finally hearing from me. And once the narrative shifted, the contrast became impossible to ignore. She had told everyone I was unstable, emotional, in need of guidance. What they heard from me was calm, measured, consistent. That difference mattered. One by one, the people she'd contacted started pulling away from her version of the story. Not dramatically, just quietly. Questions replaced blind agreement. Concern turned into doubt. That's when karma really struck. Because her identity, the caring, selfless mother, depended on controlling the story. Without that control, her behavior didn't look protective anymore. It looked invasive. The most painful moment for her came when a family member confronted her directly, not angrily, just honestly. They asked why she shared private details without permission, why she spoke about me instead of to me. She had no answer that didn't expose the family betrayal at the heart of it all. She called me again that night. This time, she was angry. "You made me look bad," she said. "I didn't raise my voice. I didn't defend myself. I didn't apologize. I told the truth." Silence followed. That silence was the sound of karma doing its work. She had used the holiday to paint herself as the hero of a quiet crisis. Now she was being seen as the source of it. The same methods she used to control me, concern, storytelling, emotional authority, were now being questioned. This wasn't punishment, this was consequence. And that's what made the revenge so complete. I didn't take anything from her. I didn't expose her publicly. I didn't humiliate her. I simply stopped carrying the weight of her actions. As the weeks passed, her calls became less frequent. Her tone shifted from dominance to uncertainty. She tested boundaries. I held them. For the first time, she didn't know where she stood with me, and that terrified her. Because family betrayal only works when the betrayer believes they'll never be held accountable. Once that illusion breaks, everything changes. The holiday she'd planned to control me had done the opposite. It had freed me, and karma, slow, quiet, undeniable, had made sure she felt every step of that reversal. Not through cruelty, through truth. And there was nothing she could do about it. I didn't feel victorious after karma struck. I felt tired. That surprised me. I imagined relief would feel louder, like a rush of justice after weeks of quiet holiday drama and emotional pressure. But what settled in instead was calm, heavy, steady calm, the kind that comes when something painful finally stops pulling at you. My mom didn't apologize, not really. She hinted, she reframed. She said things like, "I was just trying to help," and "maybe I went too far." Those weren't apologies, they were exits, attempts to step away from accountability without fully facing the family betrayal she'd created. And for the first time in my life, I didn't chase clarity from her. I stopped explaining myself. I stopped hoping she'd understand. I stopped waiting for validation that might never come. That was the real aftermath of this whole experience, not the karma she faced, but the freedom I gained. I realized something uncomfortable but necessary. Love doesn't require access, and being someone's daughter doesn't mean accepting emotional harm as normal. The holiday didn't just expose her behavior, it exposed my own patterns. How often I'd minimized pain to keep peace. How often I'd confused endurance with strength. That's how family betrayal survives for so long, not because it's invisible, but because we're trained to tolerate it. I didn't cut her off dramatically, no ultimatums, no public statements. I simply changed how close she could get. Conversations became shorter, topics became safer, boundaries became non-negotiable. She noticed, of course she did, but this time she couldn't push past them. Because something fundamental had shifted. I no longer feared losing her approval. I understood the cost of keeping it. That's the lesson no one talks about in holiday drama stories. The damage doesn't end when the trip ends. It lingers in your nervous system, in how you trust, in how you speak up. Healing isn't instant. It's quiet, intentional, often lonely, but it's real. I didn't become cruel. I didn't become cold. I became selective.
I learned that revenge doesn't always look like retaliation. Sometimes it looks like self-respect, the kind that denies manipulators the reaction they crave. Looking back, I see the holiday for what it was, not a failure, a revelation. It showed me who my mother was willing to be when she felt threatened, and it showed me who I was capable of becoming when I stopped shrinking. I still believe people can change, but I also believe patterns matter more than promises. And if there's one truth I carry forward from that painful family betrayal, it's this: you don't heal by proving them wrong. You heal by refusing to let them define you. That lesson didn't come cheap, but it stayed, and finally, it set me free.
After everything settled, after the calls slowed and the tension faded into distance, I expected to feel triumphant. I didn't. What I felt was quiet, the kind of quiet that follows a long storm. No applause, no dramatic closure, just space. That space felt unfamiliar at first. For years, my emotions had been shaped by anticipation, waiting for approval, bracing for criticism, managing reactions. The holiday drama had ripped that pattern wide open. Now, without the constant push and pull, I had to learn how to exist without emotional noise. My mom reached out occasionally. Her messages were shorter, careful, sometimes overly polite, sometimes passive. She never directly named the family betrayal, but she circled it like someone afraid to touch a wound. And for the first time, I didn't step in to make her comfortable. That was new. I didn't feel angry anymore. Anger had burned out during the trip. What replaced it was clarity, and clarity changes how close people can stand to you. I realized I didn't need to punish her. Distance was enough. Boundaries were enough. People often misunderstand revenge. They think it means becoming cruel, becoming cold, becoming someone you're not. But the most effective revenge I experienced was becoming someone she could no longer control. I stopped oversharing. I stopped explaining myself. I stopped negotiating my worth. The emotional aftermath wasn't dramatic. It was educational. I began to see how often love had been used as leverage in my life, how concern had been a tool, how guilt had kept me compliant. That awareness didn't just affect my relationship with my mother. It changed how I moved through the world. I spoke more clearly. I trusted my instincts sooner. I walked away from situations that felt familiar in the wrong way. That's the long shadow of family betrayal. It teaches you what to watch for. I didn't become hardened. I became intentional. The memory of that holiday still surfaces sometimes. Airports, suitcases, hotel hallways, moments where trust quietly shifts into something else. But those memories no longer hurt the way they did. They remind me. They remind me that just because someone gave you life doesn't mean they get to control it, that shared history doesn't excuse present harm, and that peace doesn't require confrontation. Sometimes it requires separation. If there's a lesson in all this, it's not about my mother. It's about me. I learned that I don't have to accept emotional chaos to prove loyalty. I don't have to endure manipulation to keep family intact. And I don't need loud revenge to reclaim my power. Sometimes the strongest response to holiday drama and deep family betrayal is choosing yourself, consistently, quietly, without apology. That choice didn't make me cruel, it made me free. Even now, when I think back on that trip, I don't call it a vacation, I call it a mirror. That holiday drama didn't just reveal my mother's behavior, it forced me to see my own patterns with painful clarity. How often I'd confused obligation with love, how often I'd stayed silent to avoid conflict, how often I'd accepted emotional discomfort because it came wrapped in the word family. The truth is, family betrayal doesn't always look dramatic from the outside. Sometimes it looks like concern. Sometimes it sounds like advice. Sometimes it hides behind tradition, sacrifice, or wanting the best for you. That's what makes it so hard to name. For a long time after the trip, I wondered if I'd overreacted, if I should have been more understanding, more forgiving. That doubt crept in late at night when things were quiet,
But every time it did, I asked myself one simple question. Did that holiday make me feel safer or smaller? The answer never changed. Healing didn't come from confrontation, it came from consistency, from choosing boundaries every day, even when they felt uncomfortable, from accepting that some people will never understand the damage they cause, and that waiting for them to change only delays your own peace. I didn't get the ending I once hoped for, no apology that fixed everything, no moment where she suddenly saw me clearly and changed, but I got something better. I got my voice back. And in a strange way, that's where the quiet revenge lived, not in watching her suffer, but in no longer suffering for her comfort, in living well, in living honestly, in living without fear of emotional retaliation. That holiday was meant to break me. Instead, it taught me where I end and where someone else's control begins. If you've ever felt uneasy during a family trip, if you've ever questioned your reality after a conversation with someone who claims to love you, if you've ever carried guilt that didn't quite feel like it belonged to you, you're not imagining it. Sometimes the most damaging family betrayal happens in quiet places, hotel rooms, dinner tables, long drives, where no one else can see it. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop explaining yourself and start protecting your peace. So I'll leave you with this. If you were in my place, invited into a holiday drama that slowly revealed itself as manipulation, what would you have done? Would you have stayed silent to keep the peace? Or would you have chosen yourself, even if it meant changing the relationship forever? I'm not saying my way is the only way, but I am saying this. Choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. And sometimes it's the most powerful form of revenge there is.